You know it's going to be a strange day when a woman with a helmet of brown hair is standing on your land, screaming, "That's my barn," while the police are trying to figure out why she dialed 911 over a padlock. What she didn't realize, what most people around here didn't know, is that I used to work for the DEA. And her precious nephew? Well, let's just say he's the kind of name we keep in a locked drawer in a secured office. So yeah, I figured it was time to stop playing checkers and start playing chess. I get it. This probably sounds nuts. And sure, it kind of is. But that's life out in the rural HOA belt, where homeowners association rules matter more than people. Where God help you if your mailbox isn't regulation height or your shutters are half a shade off taupe. I moved here for peace. After 2 decades in the DEA, most of that spent undercover, I wanted to settle down somewhere quiet. Trees. A couple of rescue dogs. Mornings without gunfire. I picked this house because it sat just beyond the boundary line of the Evergreen Trails HOA. Literally, my property marker was a few feet outside their jurisdiction. I could still hear their wine-fueled weekly meetings in the summer, all passive-aggressive chit-chat about people's trash bins and garden gnomes, but I didn't have to participate. And that fact alone is what started this whole mess. I've got a barn. Big, red, classic fire engine red, to be exact. Bought the place from an older guy who was a Civil War reenactor and likely not entirely well, but the man could build. Solid beams, tin roof, plenty of character. I use it for tools, gardening gear, and the occasional rescue mutt that needs a place to crash. This private property. Fenced. Locked. Completely within my rights. But to Marlene, yes, her name is actually Marlenite, was a scar on her pristine suburban dreamscape. A slap in the face to beige vinyl siding and manicured hedges. It started small, a typed note on my front door, signed, "Your concerned neighbors." Friendly reminder, neutral tones are preferred in our community. Consider repainting. I crumpled it. Next week, a couple of Evergreen Trails flyers showed up in my mailbox, which, by the way, is illegal. I'm not part of the HOA. They're not allowed to solicit me. I politely told her as much, told her I had zero interest in her suburban regime. That's when she shifted gears. Went from passive-aggressive to full-on suburban tyrant. The clipboard. The sharp little bob haircut. The morning jogs past my driveway that were more like suspicious slow walks, complete with exaggerated stretching and long-range camera zooms. One day, I caught her measuring my fence height while pretending to do yoga. I said nothing. I've dealt with cartel lieutenants and smugglers. Marlene wasn't going to get under my skin. Until the morning I found my barn door wide open. I always lock it. Every night. No exceptions. But that day it stood ajar like an invitation. A few tools had been shifted. A box of screws spilled on the floor. Nothing taken, but someone had been inside. No signs of forced entry. No broken lock. That's when I knew this wasn't some random accident. Someone had gone in on purpose. So I installed trail cams. Not your average surveillance gear, just discreet, motion-triggered wildlife cams. Normally used for tracking raccoons. This time, I was tracking a much bigger pest. Sure enough, the next evening I got an alert. I pulled up the footage and there they were, 2 teenage boys, rummaging around like it was their clubhouse. One of them was her nephew. Let's call him Trent. Because of course he's a Trent. They didn't steal anything, but they smoked something that definitely wasn't tobacco and left the place a mess. Could I have called the cops? Sure. But why waste a perfect opportunity? I upgraded the lock to a commercial-grade steel model and moved anything of real value out of the barn. All the while, I documented everything: footage, timestamps, even a copy of my property deed. Then I waited. The next morning, Marlene stormed down my gravel driveway, red-faced and righteous. She started yelling about how the boys had gotten scared when they couldn't get in last night and how it was irresponsible of me to lock the barn without informing the community. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "It's my barn. My land. And unless your nephew has a key to federal property, which he doesn't, this shouldn't be in there at all." That's when she did it. Pulled out her phone and called 911. Told the dispatcher I was illegally detaining community property and had locked up a shared resource. I swear, the officer who showed up looked like he expected a cat in a tree, not a shouting match in front of a barn. I calmly showed them the footage. The deed. The documents proving I wasn't part of the HOA. One officer pulled me aside and asked quietly, "What's your background, sir?" I gave the smallest hint of a smile. Flashed the corner of my old badge. Federal. Retired-ish. They nodded, left with barely a warning. Marlene stood there, practically foaming, ranting about legal action. But what she didn't know was that Trent had just triggered a very different kind of response. See, when I ran a background check not officially, just through a few channels I found out he wasn't just a dumb kid. He was listed in our system. Petty possession charge, sure, but also flagged as an associate of a mid-tier meth distributor out of the next county over. And that guy? He was still active, still under watch, and now I had a new link on the chain. A former agent living right next to a known contact with full surveillance footage and a front row seat. Marlene had just handed the feds a gift, wrapped it up with HOA ribbon and everything. But I couldn't pounce just yet. Had to let it build. Let her think she was winning. And oh, she really did. Over the next week, she filed a zoning complaint. Mailed me an unsigned letter threatening legal action. Then, in her grand masterpiece of idiocy, she left a voicemail pretending to be someone from the county's code enforcement office. Her voice pitched low like someone doing a bad improv skit. I saved it. Sent it to a buddy in the clerk's office. Took them about 6 minutes to confirm no such complaint had ever been filed, and that impersonating a government official was something they were very interested in. Then it happened. Another motion alert. This time? Marlene. Alone. In my barn. Holding something she absolutely shouldn't have. There she was, standing in the very building she'd spent weeks calling an eyesore, clutching a small metal box, glancing around like she knew exactly how deep she was in. It wasn't random. This wasn't a tantrum. She was looking for something and trying not to get caught. Which, of course, meant I recorded every second. I didn't call the cops. Not yet. I had bigger plans. Because that box? That wasn't just some junk. It was a piece of equipment tied to an ongoing DEA investigation. Something we'd planted months earlier in a separate case and relocated during a reshuffle. It wasn't marked, but it was traceable. And now she'd touched it. Tampered with it. She left the barn like nothing had happened. Closed the door behind her. Walked home smug. And that was her fatal mistake. I brought everything: footage, context, background to the sheriff. The guy behind the counter didn't even blink. What's up, Dan? Another Karen situation. Better, I replied, handing him a flash drive. This one's actually interesting. They ran it through their system. Confirmed the box. Confirmed the connections. What started as HOA harassment had now crossed into federal territory. Stacy, sorry, Marlene was in way over her head. A few days later, her nephew got picked up. Caught with product. His arrest led them right back to Marlene's property, and now we had probable cause. Early one morning, as the sun barely crept over the pines, I sat on my porch with a thermos of coffee and watched 3 black SUVs glide down the road. No sirens. No warning. DEA agents. Moving like shadows. They hit the house in coordinated silence. Front. Back. Side. A soft breach. No flapbangs. Within minutes, they had Trent in cuffs. Marlene screaming in a robe on the porch. Her older son, just released from state prison, was pulled out with dead eyes and no fight left in him. Then came the bags. 3 duffels. Pulled from crawl spaces, the attic, the garage. Marlene stood there, frozen. Realizing in slow motion that her house had been used for felony distribution. Her fingerprints would be on half the evidence. She wasn't just a neighbor anymore. She was a suspect. She tried to stare me down from the lawn. I nodded. Not smug. Just final. The HOA turned on her instantly. Emergency meeting that afternoon. A vote to remove her. Unanimous. She was stripped of her presidency. Her social clout. Her kingdom of beige. And the kicker? She didn't even know I'd orchestrated the whole thing. Not really. She suspected, maybe. But she had no proof. I hadn't broken a single law. I just waited. She filed a civil suit. Claimed emotional distress. Conspiracy. Harassment. I laughed. Showed up in court with a binder of receipts, timestamps, forged letters. The judge dismissed the case in 10 minutes. Fined her for wasting the court's time. Her house went dark. Bills piled up. She stopped showing up to meetings. Eventually, the HOA fined her for dues. When she didn't pay, they foreclosed. I bought the house. Cash. turned it into a recovery center for nonviolent drug offenders. The irony wasn't lost on me. Months later, she showed up one last time, yelled across the street, threatened more lawsuits. She mailed me a photo of the barn. Just that. No message. I taped it to the fridge, right next to the foreclosure receipt. Because here's the thing. I didn't destroy her. I didn't have to. She did it to herself. And somewhere out there, in another freshly minted HOA, I hear Marlene's trying again. Different town, same energy. God help them.